Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything Dungeons & Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we are taking a look at the subclasses for the Barbarian in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We're going to go through all of the subclasses that have been published for the 5th edition rules and rank them from the S tier to the bottom tier, talking about the reasons why we've ranked them this way so that you can help decide which is going to be the perfect one for your next character.
Now, up on the screen, you're going to see the criteria we had for deciding the ranking of these subclasses. We are leaving role-playing out of this, as we believe that any subclass can be role-played really well, so it's not an appropriate metric. Instead, we're going to be looking at their features and abilities and how they augment the base class.
And of course, while combat is one of the metrics which we're using to assess the subclasses, that's particularly true of the Barbarian as a combat-driven class in general, we are also looking at how the subclass offers new features for both social interaction, exploration, puzzle solving, and all elements of the game as a whole, although we are not necessarily using multi-classing as a primary requisite for how strong the subclass is. We want to look at the powers and abilities of the subclass all the way from first level all the way to 20th level to really assess which overall is the strongest and which ones you might want to reconsider taking.
You can check out the video right up over here for all the criteria we use for ranking these subclasses. And as well, we've also polled the community to see what their opinions are. So we will be comparing our opinions to the opinions of the community. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
First up, we've got the Ancestral Guardian, introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. For me, I give the Ancestral Guardian an A. I think that this is a really unique subclass that excels within its specific niche of being the frontline protector. The Ancestral Protectors and Spirit Shield abilities granted by the subclass are really unique in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. There's really no other class in D&D 5e that has such a strong 4th edition style marking the target mechanic. When you attack a target as an Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, that target now, if it doesn't attack you, is going to have disadvantage on its attacks and deal half damage to whoever else in your party it attacks, and you'll be able to use your reaction to further reduce this damage. As a frontline protector, I think the Ancestral Guardian simply excels.
For the Ancestral Guardian, I actually gave it a B tier rating. And although I don't disagree with anything that you stated, I do think that it is a little bit more niche in its implementation than some of the other options which are stronger. I do really like the Ancestral Guardian. I think that it does have a lot to offer if placed in the right campaign setting. Another really interesting thing that I came up with while reading through the Ancestral Guardian is if you were to use this in more of a focus on throw-in weapons or any sort of ranged attacks, you can actually make really interesting use of its abilities for battlefield control. If you can huck a hand axe at an enemy who is already in close combat with a different character, and now you're using your abilities to make it so that if they attack somebody other than you, they have disadvantage, this is a really interesting way to implement these ideas. So I think, although it's a very strong option, there are other options that might be stronger. Also, the best features of this class come in the first few levels of playing it. If you actually are pulling an Ancestral Guardian all the way to the higher tier play, you might find that some of the higher end abilities don't actually deliver that well on what you want your Barbarian to be able to do.
On the community side, our polling showed that 49% agree with me. It's an A tier subclass, with 30% giving it the B.
That's fair. I do think that I actually had a hard time deciding if it was going to be A tier or B tier. The main reason is, as you'll see later on, there are ones that I chose as A tier that I think are just stronger options.
Yeah, a few people did give it the S tier as well, and a few ranking it even lower than that. But I think very solidly we can say that this is an A-B tier type subclass, and played well, I think it will totally excel.
Next up, we have the Battlerager, which was introduced in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide and does have a little caveat that is only available for dwarf players. Now, DMs do have the option of raising this restriction, which might immediately make it a better option in my opinion. I did rank the Battlerager as a C tier subclass. The reason mostly being that, first of all, it is only limited to dwarves if you are playing it by the rules as written. And next off, it is a good option for dealing damage, but it is not the best option for dealing damage. And I do think that there are several other subclasses that the Barbarian presents that are better at doing a lot of what this subclass has to offer. Using a bonus action to cause damage with your spiky armor can be really, really fun, and there are some cool ways that this does amplify the Barbarian class. But at the end of the day, there are more options to choose from that I just think deliver on these concepts better.
I agree with your ranking, Kelly. This is a solid C because it competes with feats and other options available quite widely to barbarians. I think what's attractive about the Battlerager is the ability to gain temporary hit points on your reckless attacks and being able to make attacks with your spiked armor as a bonus action. Unfortunately, it's a pretty feeble amount of temporary hit points, and the spike damage is not that impressive either. There are much more effective ways to weaponize your bonus action as a barbarian, namely taking Polearm Master. And then you can go to town with your two-handed halberd or glaive and apply Great Weapon Master, which I think most barbarians are going to be wanting to do anyways. So if you have a specific thing in mind, yeah, you can throw your armor spikes at them. It's just not that impressive in terms of the overall damage output.
Our community poll puts this at 39% for a C tier ranking, which was the largest of the percentages. There is about 27% in either a B or D tier ranking, which I think does really make this land very safely as a C tier.
The next one is from the Player's Handbook, and that is the Berserker Barbarian, perhaps one of the most iconic and strangely popular subclasses chosen for the Barbarian, because a lot of people are really, really excited by the Frenzy ability, which, like the Battlerager's ability to let you attack as a bonus action, Frenzy lets you upgrade your rage so that when you attack on your turn, you can also make an additional attack with your bonus action. Unfortunately, once you go into a Frenzy, when your rage ends, you gain 1 level of exhaustion, which is a really, really staggering drawback to have. For this reason, I personally give this a D. I think that the exhaustion drawback is paralyzing unless you are playing in a campaign where you only ever have one combat encounter between your long rests. 1 level of exhaustion isn't too bad. It's just disadvantage on ability checks. But 2 levels of exhaustion is going to have your speed, and 3 levels of exhaustion is going to give you disadvantage on attack rolls, at which point you are using rage and reckless attack to compensate for the weaknesses that you've piled on your character. So yeah, 1 or 2 combat encounters worth of Frenzy sounds pretty good, but again, you could just take Polearm Master, get your bonus extra action attack, and not have to worry about this drawback at all.
I completely agree with your ranking. This is a D class tier. The exhaustion, even at 1 level of exhaustion, is already hampering the things that you want your barbarian to be good at. And that's really the thing that we're looking for here is, does the subclass improve upon what the class already offers? At the end of the day, adding exhaustion to the barbarian rage, which is what all barbarians are here to do, is really taking away from what this class is supposed to offer. I have had many barbarian players at my table, and they always love going into a rage for the multiple combat encounters that I run at a given game. I have my barbarians blow through most of their rages in a game session. And if you can imagine them ending up with 3 or 4 levels of exhaustion at the end of every game session, this doesn't make it fun to play a barbarian. So I'm putting this at a heavy D tier ranking.
Of course, going into Frenzy is optional, but if you're not using your Frenzy ability, it's like you didn't get a core ability of your subclass at all. Mindless Rage is pretty cool. Being immune to Charm and Fear is pretty sweet. And also the Retaliatory Strike that you get at 14th level is a pretty neat ability and a nice extra way to use your reaction. But once again, if you're going to take Polearm Master as a Barbarian, you've already got a really cool way to attack with your reaction. So I think that this whole subclass is kind of overwritten by taking Polearm Master.
I think that you could get a better option here by choosing a different subclass and taking some awesome feats that would really give you all of the things that you like about this subclass anyway.
So looking at the community's response, either we're wrong or everyone disagrees over the subclass, because 24% of people gave the Berserker an A. 31% gave it a B, 22% gave it a C, and only 16% gave it a D. So maybe we're just totally wrong, and this ability is awesome, and everybody's only playing in campaigns where you have 1 or 2 combat encounters before you take a rest, and it's never a drawback.
I'm actually surprised. I 100% thought that the community would agree with us on this, and that this was well known as a bad subclass. But maybe not. Maybe it's a favorite for some people, and I think a lot of new players do gravitate towards the Berserker. But interesting results. We literally have had a player character die of exhaustion from playing a Berserker and going through too many combat encounters and raging and frenzying too much that they just outright died. So there's that.
Now, granted, the scenario did include elements that added at levels of exhaustion, but they ended up with 5 levels of exhaustion, and then that 6th one come in, and they died.
Next up, we have the Storm Herald, which was introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything and adds a little bit of elemental to your Barbarian, which is kind of a cool concept, but I did give this one a C tier ranking. Although it is fun in context, and when you read through it, there are a lot of things that sound really awesome, compared to the other subclasses, it just doesn't add up. To me, if you're playing it in a campaign where playing a Storm Herald sounds like it fits the theme and you will be able to implement these abilities in the right way, then yes, it could be kind of neat. But overall, it just takes away from a lot of what the other subclasses actually add to the class as a whole. This one just kind of feels stagnant to me.
I gave the Storm Herald a solid B. The Storm Aura class feature of the Storm Herald is an ability, first of all, that you can change and shuffle around your choice of abilities whenever you level up. And I like that kind of flexibility because it lets you pick the one that works for your strategies, your party, and your campaign. Not only that, the ability happens when you start your rage, so it doesn't take away anything from anything else that you want to do. It's just extra gravy poured on the amazing goodness that is the Barbarian's rage. So if you want to combine this with Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master, with your choice of weapons and tactics and anything else, it's just going to make your rage a little bit better. It's not jaw-droppingly awesome in the way that it improves the rage, but I like it. I think it's solid.
I do agree that this does add some nice gravy to the class that already exists, but it is store-bought packet gravy, and it isn't going to be the delicious homemade gravy that you can make using the other subclass options. It is better than 1 or 2 of the other options presented, but I still think that given the strength of some of the other ones, that this one just fell further on the list for me. But I do think that BC is a great place to put this subclass.
Looking at our community poll, 48% of respondents gave this one a B as well, with the remaining respondents pretty much equally divided amongst giving it A's or C's. So I think that solidly places it in the B tier, with the potential for it to be a little bit higher, maybe in the right circumstances, which is exactly where the B tier is. Remember, when we give something the B tier, that means that it is a subclass that has potential in the right campaign. If it would have potential in the right campaign, that's the B metric. It's all campaigns that get you up in the higher there, and I do think that this is one of those subclasses where you're kind of losing out on the opportunity cost of the better options.
You know, I am moderately persuaded, and at the end of the day, I believe that having store packet gravy is still better than having no gravy at all, which the Berserker gives me no gravy. So maybe the gravy is a B tier.
Brace yourself, because the true raging spirit is here in the form of the Totem Warrior, which unequivocally is one of the best, if not the best, Barbarian subclass, and I very solidly give this one an S tier. The bevy of options that you can choose as your animal totems, from the 3rd level Bear Totem, granting you resistance to all damage which isn't psychic damage, right away as long as you're raging, to the higher level Eagle Totems, which lets your Barbarian fly. The flexibility and raw power of the options presented by the Totem Warrior make it solidly the best pick in almost all cases for a Barbarian.
I agree with your ranking. This is definitely the S tier option for Barbarians. And in my opinion, it just doubles down on everything you want the Barbarian to be. I have literally seen a Bear Totem Barbarian on a castle wall confronting an army of giants who decided this is taking too long, jumped off the wall and charged them and came out on top. And I just can't find a way to kill a Bear Totem Barbarian. They are unreal in their resilience. And the other options, if you aren't going for the Bear Totem, give you the versatility to really play around with what you want your Barbarian to be. There is nothing in this subclass that takes away or is not exciting for the Barbarian class as a whole.
If you don't like the Bear Totem, you could take the Amazing Wolf Totem instead, which means that your allies have advantage on melee attacks they make against any hostile enemy that's within 5 feet of you as well, which is the easiest way to generate advantage on melee attacks in the entire game. But it even gives you some cool out-of-combat abilities in being able to cast Commune with Nature, too. So it's one of the few Barbarian subclasses that actually gives you something that isn't just hitting things even harder.
Not to mention, you later on get the ability to fly as an option. So what's scarier than a Barbarian? A flying Barbarian. I can't imagine anything better for a subclass for a Barbarian.
All of the 6th level features are all utility based. And the 14th level ones are as well. And you don't care because the 3rd level ones are so good in battle that this subclass can just heap on that extra delicious gravy with your mashed potatoes.
It is incredibly difficult to not want to take the Totem Warrior as your subclass option for the Barbarian.
The community response to this was an avalanche, with 68% of respondents giving it the S tier, and the remaining 26.7% giving it the A tier.
So, yeah, everybody agrees with us. You all know it's the best. We don't really have to argue about that.
All of the awesomeness of the Totem Warrior aside, I personally think the Zealot Barbarian is also worthy of the S tier, for many of the same reasons, but also for a few different ones. One of the things that the Totem Warrior does not give you is more damage, but you do get that from the Zealot, which basically gives you an extra Divine Smite on the first attack that you land every turn while you're raging. If you want a way to rack up the extra damage that just is layering and layering on top of whatever the Barbarian is doing anyways, the Zealot gives you that, and I think it's a really easy choice to make. If you don't care about the defensive features or the bolstering features of the Totem Warrior, the Zealot might be your ticket.
I agree with everything you said, but I actually gave it an A tier ranking. And the reason for that is that I still think that the Totem Warrior delivers on better versatility and options than the Zealot does. However, I love the flavor of the Zealot. I love the improved damage output. Adding some divine energy into your attacks is outstanding. And for that reason, A tier, which for us means that it is a great choice in any campaign. I just think that when I compare it to the Totem Warrior gives me better options and better versatility, so it is the only one that I wanted to give an S tier to. The Zealot is such a strong choice and falls just short of the S tier for me, and I think that it is easily the second best option of subclass. And if you're excited about it, by all means pick that over the Totem Warrior, but I still think that's a hard choice to make.
I've seen more barbarians bite the dust in my D&D campaigns than characters of any other class. And the fact that you can get raised and resurrected at no cost is actually a pretty relevant benefit for a barbarian. Rage Beyond Death is incredible as well as a high-level feature. And I love that this is one of the only barbarian subclasses that has a real battle cry that inspires all your allies. Again, you're right. It doesn't really do anything else aside from getting back into battle and surviving battle and getting resurrected when you die in battle, inevitably. Whereas the Totem Warrior actually gives you some extra sauce. But I think if you really like your extra strong spicy gravy and you're very particular about your flavor options, the Zealot is your ticket. So I think the community response really captures our mixed feelings about the Zealot, because 32% of respondents gave it an S tier, which is the second highest for S tiers amongst the barbarian subclasses, and 43% gave it the A, with a good 18% actually only giving it a B, which surprises me, to be honest. So I think that really solidly puts it in that borderline between the tiers, and I think that if you are going for the all-out damage dealing, I think that that's what propels it into the S tier. But the versatility and the diversity of the Totem Warrior means it pulls out slightly ahead within the tier.
So up on screen here, you're going to see our final rankings for the subclasses of the Barbarian. These are our opinions, and some of them do disagree with some of the community opinions, but it is up to you to decide what you love about these subclasses and what really makes them speak to you. We just hope that this guide has been useful for you to maybe make some decisions on which subclasses are going to be the best and most beneficial for the class as a whole.
Overall, the Barbarian is a very, very strong class with a strong focus on melee combat and its raw strength. So we have to measure all the subclasses based on, do the subclasses augment the rage ability and make the Barbarian a more survivable and better frontline melee combatant? The Totem Warrior and the Zealot absolutely do this, whereas the Battlerager and the Berserker have too many middling features and drawbacks to really propel them in comparison to the other ones.
And as a final note, again, if you have a great character concept in mind with beautiful role-playing ideas, any of these subclasses can be an outstanding option for you. We're strictly talking about the mechanics, and that is something to look at, and you have to decide for yourself if one is more important than the other.
At the end of the day, these are just our opinions and our rankings and our community polling. Not super scientific, no hard and fast metrics, so don't let these get in the way of playing the character that you have in mind or make you feel bad about the choices that you've made for your character.
So this has been a look at the various types of gravy. So this has been a look at our rankings of the Barbarian subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If you agreed or disagreed with us, let us know in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the amazing generosity of our Patreon supporters, and we thank them deeply. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider supporting us by following the links in the description below or by visiting patreon.com/dungeon_dudes.
Don't forget to check out our live plays in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/dungeon_dudes. You can find all the previous episodes of those shows right up over here.
And we've got plenty more class guides and rankings to the various classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.